by 2029. So that's something big. But now we have all these small decisions that what we need to do every year, every month. But the good news are that last spring when we made a review, and it was our national scientific climate panel who made a review that what we have done, and they said that we are on the track. But that was last spring, so we need to keep going. So we are on the track in the future as well. So decision every month.
I think well, it's encouraging to know in the group there are at least some people on track and those who are quite close. Tina, I'm going to come to you first. In Iceland, what would you say you're failing at doing well? You know, we've heard lots of things about what's going well in places, but what are if you were to name one or two areas that really needs to see action in Iceland on climate change, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm going to choose those areas that I feel also have a huge mitigation potential, where we really can make an effort, and we need to tackle really the fishing industry, a really big industry in Iceland, and of course an industry with a lot of power. So maybe there's some kind of resistance to really aiming for that and trying to do something, and that is reflected in our action plan. Then we have our big industry, we have agriculture, and then the tourism sector. I mean, really, because a huge part of Iceland's emission comes from the transportation sector, and we have so much, the tourism is really relying on that, and we need to build up infrastructure, for example, for the rental vehicles, because everyone is flying here, then they all drive around, and we really are lacking infrastructure. People can have a more environmentally friendly way of transportation.
So it's interesting, we're starting to see pushback on some of the ambition. I think that might be something that we can talk about in due course. Helmut, I mean, where do you feel Austria really needs to up its game?
Well, to start with, on the energy sector, I think we are well on the way. We have phased out coal in power production already 1 year ago, so there are no coal-fired power plants anymore in Austria. We share the same problem as Iceland. Transport is difficult, we know this, and we have a mobility plan, but this is only from the Climate Action Ministry, it's not a government position. We as ministry aim to stop licensing of new fossil-fueled cars by 2030, but this is not a common governing position so far. So transport is really difficult, and heavy industry as well. This is something is of course within the emissions trading scheme, the European emissions trading scheme, but we have steel plants, we have cement kilns, so there are plans how we could decarbonize this, but it's expensive, and there are plans, but they need a lot of power additional, and yeah, we will see hydrogen might be, so renewable hydrogen might be a solution here. And agriculture is also difficult, because it's easier to cope with CO2 emissions, but methane from animal housing, it's difficult. We have a very small structured agricultural system, so no big installations where you can filter methane. No way. Our standard stables have 10 to 20 cows. That's it. So there are no technical solutions are not feasible. So agriculture will be difficult until 2040 to completely decarbonize. We hope for natural things to balance this out.
Okay, so agriculture is one we might come back to. Transport seems like it's becoming a thing. Krista, so you said that so far your advice is you're on track, but what worries you? What do you think when they do their analysis next year, they're going to say, Minister, we're not on track for this, what do you already know?
Yeah, well, we have the same challenges. The agriculture is one. We really haven't been able to reduce the emissions since late 90s. So that's something, and the agriculture sector itself doesn't even have a target for its own. Now we are going to put a target for it, and now we have a good discussion going on in Finland that agriculture sector need to have their share as well. And I think there's a lot we can do there. So it's not a question that there won't be different kind of things to do. It's more that we really need to have a target and start to work. And there's a lot of farmers who are doing the things and doing different kind of new technical methods and all kind of things that they can reduce the emissions. But the whole sector, we really need to work with them together. The one thing is that we have a lot of peatland, and we know that there's a lot of emission coming from the peatland, and that's the one hard thing for us. And when we are talking about the peat is have been kind of blind spot for Finland for many years, and we have been even burning the peat. We are still burning the peat, and that's what we really need to phase out, because that's quite easy in a way, even though then at the same time we need to take care that those people who are now working there, we can re-educate them to some other field and make sure that we have this kind of just transition. But the agriculture, and then get rid of the use of the peat, and then the transport sector is hard for us as well, because we are a large country, and the public transportation is not available in most of the part of the country.
Okay, I think we definitely have to come to transport in a second, in agriculture. Michael, do you want to maybe expand upon where you think Scotland's, and why we've got these challenges in certain sectors?
So I think before just doing that, I think we need to look at where we have come from and the progress that we have made. So we are now at the point in Scotland where we have no power stations that operate in coal. Almost 100% of our electricity comes from renewable sources. That's happened over the course of the last decade. So we've made extremely good progress in those areas. And we've got very ambitious renewable energy projects in the North Sea, in particular in floating offshore wind. We've had an extensive programme of reforestation. So 80% of all the forestry that was planted in the UK last year was planted in Scotland. We also have a very ambitious programme of trying to undo the mistake we made, which was drying out some of our peatland for renewable energy projects and for agricultural projects, and they're now net emitters. So we now have a major programme of re-wetting them in order to get them back into being carbon sinks for us. So that's going to be a major element. Areas where things are not going as well as they should are in transport, agriculture, and I think the challenge, and you're going to come to transport, so I'll concentrate on agriculture, Lang. I think the challenge around agriculture is not just the change of process in farming in the agricultural sector or the application of technology to the agricultural sector. It's also about changing the way in which we use our land. And that's quite fundamental, because keep in mind, many of those who are involved in our agricultural sector will have owned the land and farmed the land for, some cases, generations. And actually asking them to use it in a different way for a different purpose is quite challenging. So that transition in agriculture is going to be a difficult one, because it's more than technology and process. It's about changing the way in which people lead their lives and the way in which they operate and manage the land. And I think the third area I would mention is probably building and construction. Again, big emitters in terms of particularly domestic heating, poor energy efficiency in properties, and also just the construction process for whether it be domestic or non-domestic premises, which contribute a large amount to our greenhouse gas levels. So they're areas we need to make more progress in. We're putting a lot of investment into these areas, so over the course of the next 5 years we'll spend about £1.8 billion on decarbonising domestic homes and their heating systems, moving to heat pumps. District heating systems will all play a critical part in that. But the pace at which that can be taken forward is constraining us in meeting some of our targets. So we have made good progress in some areas, but the areas that we are probably meeting greatest difficulty, or will be the most difficult politically to manage, are those which involve behaviour change. And about 60% of what we need to do in meeting our targets are focused around behaviour change. And as politicians, when politicians start to demand behaviour change, it politically becomes much more risky and much more divisive politically in parliaments when it comes to debating these matters. So that's where I think we're at, and I think that's where we need to make further progress in some areas, and also where I think some of the political challenge may be.
Thank you. Tina, I'm going to come to you next. So as the non-politician here, non-government representative, what do you think of what you've heard here? You've heard of kind of the challenges, the missed targets, or kind of where the challenged sectors are. What does that make you think?
I can understand where you're going from with the behavior change and the cultural. We just live in this culture now. We've grown up with these certain things that we do, especially in the agriculture industry, and I kind of feel sometimes this huge difference between how young people like me think and how people that are a bit older, tend to rationalize things, because we tend to look over the step we have to take towards this future that we're trying to create, and we're more ready because we know the future is going to be good in every way, both socially, economically, and environmentally. So we're ready to take the leap, whilst people that are just grown up in this system, they can't. It seems too challenging, or they're scared to really do it. But we know there's something better out there, so we're ready to make radical changes, because we can't. We of course we have to take small steps, but we also have to take really big ones. So yeah.
So Helmut, radical change is what young people want. What do you say to that?
Well, in fact, it's true. We need quick and significant change, especially for our tough target. It's tough. As you said, behavior change is really key. We have to address our public. They have to adopt and accept what we plan. For instance, we did not mention the housing sector, so heating systems. This is also something where we are, I hope, well underway. We will phase out fossil fuel heating systems by 2035. So complete, we will also old installation systems has to be changed to renewables. It's difficult, well, in rural areas it's doable. It's difficult in large cities like Vienna or other cities. District heating systems might help, but other systems are not so not really possible. So switching to, let's say, a renewable heating system with peat or pellets will not work in a flat in the center of Vienna. So this is something we will have to have a close look. And here the public has to support us, has to accept, okay, if we aim for a decarbonized future, if we aim for climate neutrality, it's a better environment. We have better lives, we have better air in the cities, and this is something we have to say to the public.
Okay, so keep going back to the theme, and I'll come to you both here at this end. I'll be particularly keen, if you want to build on that, fair enough, but I'd be really interested in transport's been identified by both of you as big challenges. What are you intending to do in that space in order to try and get back on track? Michael?
So I think there's a number of things around transport. So key part's going to be decarbonising the transport system as much as possible. I think most people think that means, okay, let's just switch to electric cars. No, it doesn't. Electric cars are part of the answer, but we also want to use it as a way in which we can redesign some of our communities and our neighbourhoods to make the car the outsider rather than the dominating factor. So we need to redesign some of our communities to encourage people to make use of active travel, to encourage them to be able to walk and cycle, to wheel. And that means fundamentally redesigning communities. So part of it's about, again, behaviour change and using technology. We also need to expand and develop our public transport network. The challenge we have in our public transport network is that it can be expensive for people to use, and in some communities services are not of a good standard, that they don't have a frequency of service. Are we making progress in some of these areas? Yes, we are. So the electric car charging network in Scotland is larger than any other part of the UK, more extensive than any other part of the UK, with the exception of the centre of London. So we're making progress. Are we investing in active travel? Yes, our investment in active travel, cycling, walking and wheeling, has doubled in the last 3 years, and over the course of this Parliament will go from £115 million a year to £350 million a year. So we are trebling it over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. In decarbonising our public transport network, if you've used a train between Glasgow and Edinburgh, they are all electric, new trains. 75% of all train journeys in Scotland are on electric trains using renewable energy, but that's only 40% of our network. So we need to expand that so that it's all decarbonised by 2035. And we then have to make sure that our heavy industries, heavy goods vehicles, etc., are decarbonising as well in using alternative methods, whether it be electric or hydrogen, and the opportunities that come from that. So it's a combination of technology and behaviour change and affordability. And we need to make sure that we make our communities easier for people to make the right choices. And that is active travel, walking, cycling and wheeling, and using public transport, and make it more difficult for the car. So that involves quite a significant shift from how planning and our approach has been to date. And again, that goes right back to this issue about changing people's behaviour by designing things in a different way that force them to do things in a different way.
So that's a good set of policies and actions going on there, and I kind of like the carrot and stick approach too. Does that sound familiar? What would be the similar and what would be the differences in the approach in Finland, for example?
Yeah, well, that sounds similar. I mean, we need many different kind of measures to do it, and also the cycling and walking, and then how we reduce the emissions from the cars, because in Finland you really need your own car in many places. You can't count on the public transport. And actually, I must say that there's when you are talking about the cars and like you're having your own car, that's also a discussion that the people are thinking that don't come here and take my car, and then you really need to explain that no, you can have your car, but we want to look at the emissions, and we need to have those emissions down. And of course the electricity car is one option, but in Finland actually we have a lot of discussion about the biogas and how we can use biogas for the transport. Well, we know that for the heavy, especially for the heavy transport is a good one, but also for the your own private cars, because in Finland people have very old cars, and it's you can change your car, which is using now the benzene or diesel, for the using the biogas. So that would be also one option, and it's not so expensive for the families. So that's what we are doing as well, and we are having these little subsidies for the families. For to buy the electricity car or change the old car for using the biogas, and then also we need to have this network for charging, and also the network for have this biogas. But I want to go back to that we need to change, and we need to change is our way of living, and it needs to be fast enough so we can really make sure that we are on the path to 1.5. But I think most of the people are ready for that. If you look at the surveys, for example, in Finland, what we have done, many people are saying that I'm willing to change my way of living if I know that all the others are doing the same. So for us as politicians, we should be just brave enough to do those decisions, because when people know that it's for everyone, they are more willing to understand, and then they do understand why we are doing it. But if there's if you need to do something, but you can see your neighbor doesn't need to do it, that's the problem. So that's why I think we just should be brave enough to do those decisions.
So it's clear politicians need to be brave, and leaders need to lead, I guess, in many respects. Helmut, I'm going to come to you first on this one, partly because of your role as the head of delegation for Austria. But we're sat on stage here, 4 nations who would say they've got very good targets. Yes, we've got variable delivery so far, but we often talk about those ambitious targets as part of the reason is it's to help encourage and inspire other countries to set high ambition in action. How is that useful? Do you find that a useful narrative in the role that you have, for example?
Yes, I think so. Events like this, we can sell our case, we can show examples, and I very much can subscribe what both ministers have said before me, every sentence. It's really the example, the role model of convincing the neighbor. It's sexy to drive an electric-driven car. It's sexy to have photovoltaics on your roof. So that's really key. And I think we can sell this here. We are proud to be part of the High Ambition Coalition, and we use such gatherings like a COP also to talk to other delegations and explain our case. Tell people that it's a better living.
Thank you. Tina, how do you, when you've had lots of meetings, too many meetings maybe, and interviews, how do you talk about the situation in Iceland? I mean, do you feel proud that it has high ambition, but maybe question about its delivery? How do you go about inspiring? Do you use Iceland as an inspiration?
Yeah, I think we can say that yes, of course, like carbon neutrality 2040, because it's before the end of the century, can be called ambitious in some way, but I try to emphasize that in Iceland we've just legislated that it's going to happen. We have not decided in what way is it going to be a just transition, what factors are we going to take into account, and it's also, I want to mention one thing that's really unique in Iceland's emission profile, which is emissions from land use, because we have drained so much of the wetlands, and we have also soil erosion, so this is like, I relate to what you were saying, there are problems, so this is in fact the biggest single emission factor for Iceland if we count all emissions. So it's really important, how are we going to account for that when we're starting our accounting of minuses and pluses. And yeah, I want to say Iceland can say that yes, we have that goal that is ambitious in some way, but it depends on how we do it. And also we are talking about here reducing emissions like Iceland in the joint EU and Norway target, but still Iceland has to admit that even though we have come up past the threshold of energy transformation in house heating and electricity, we still have one of the highest emission profiles per capita, even if you exclude the land use, you know. So we still need to kind of clean up in our backyard before we start telling others to do really well, you know.
Yeah, very important that. Michael, so Scotland's not a party to the COP, so what role do you feel Scotland can play in this with its ambition and its, you know, so far where it's going on its delivery?
Well, look, I think leadership is really important, and I think very often when countries are on the road to setting their net zero targets, it can feel a lonely journey, and events and the opportunities like COP create an environment where you can share experience and understanding and look for potential routes in which you can cooperate to support one another on that net zero, because it's a global challenge and it requires a global effort, and we all have to play our part. And critical now, I think, as we heard from world leaders just last week, this is the decisive decade. This is a decade where it needs to focus on delivery, and that we need to see pace of delivery. Critical to that is not nation states. Very often subnational governments, local city governments, regional authorities are actually central to the delivery of those targets, and are much, much closer to people who will be impacted by those decisions and the way in which they will be implemented. Therefore, I think one of the real challenges going forward is not just a dialogue that takes place at state level, but it's a dialogue that takes place at a supranational level, at every level that has to play its part in delivering on these targets and making it happen on the ground. And we know that something like 50% of the emission reductions which will be necessary to meet the 2050 target, more 50% of that is in the hands of what's often referred to as subnational governments. So it's okay for national governments, state governments to sign treaties, but actual delivery is very often going to be in others' hands. And we need to get that right, and internationally we need to encourage and develop that dialogue to allow that to take place. So I think one of the things that we're in danger of getting wrong at a nation-state level is a failure to embed our thinking around how we deliver a fair and just transition for everyone. And that means taking decisions and taking an approach which is based on communities and individuals and as close to them as possible. Not at COP, not at a heads of state level, but actually in communities and at an individual level. Because we all have to play a collective part in meeting these targets. And I think this decisive decade has to be one which is defined upon delivering that just transition, but doing it at a level that is closest to people and the communities that will be impacted by it.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Chris, on that, just to heads up, I will be coming to the audience for a question straight after this, so maybe if you'd be thinking what it might be, then I can come to you. Otherwise, I'll have to ask her it. Krista.
So your question was
about the role of as a nation that's kind of got high ambition. How do you actually go about using that to inspire others?
Yeah. Well, of course we are proud of our carbon neutral target 2035, but we have understood that the target itself is something, but we need then deliver that real action. And of course we are happy for that also that we have started strongly and we need to keep going. And I think it's important to talk about this target and tell about it, and tell also the challenges that we are having, so that other countries can learn of it. But I think I also see the role of the municipalities very important, and also the role of the business, role of the whole society. And I think for Finland, we have managed to have the whole society with us. After we put this 2035 target, we quite soon noticed that it's not only the government who are talking about the climate policy, it's not only the government who is talking about the 2035 target, it's the whole society, and that's what we need. And I'm very happy that, for example, here now in COP there's not only the countries, there's all these other, there's municipalities, there's business, there are different kind of organization. We have different kind of new initiatives and pledges that the business is joining in, the municipalities is joining in, and that's what we need. And at the same time, when I want to tell what Finland is doing, I want to be proud of that, what we are doing. I want others to join in, and I'm happy that now the other Scandinavian countries, for example, some of them are even like doing better than we are, because there's a kind of competition going on that who can be the best, and that's the one way to just kind of encourage others and make sure that all the countries are involved.
I like the idea of healthy competition, a race to the top. So I'm just going to check hands if you have a question in the audience. There's one, so wait for a microphone. If you could say your name and if you're with an organisation where you're from, and then ask your question, please. No speeches, please, but question.
Okay. Hi, Logan. Hello. Hi, I'm Logan from Hope for the Future. This question is sort of mostly directed at Michael, but I'd be very interested for sort of anyone's feed in. So we spoke a little bit in this about we've spoken a lot today about the challenges of reaching 1.5. That's the theme of the event. And I just want to sort of hone in on and get your thoughts on a particular piece of that jigsaw, which is, skills, education, training. So, because we've talked, for instance, about like heating, and that's one of the things that's been brought up. We've recently had the Green Homes Grant here in the UK, which failed, or which was rolled back largely because of lacking skills. So I'd just be really interested for people's thoughts on, what role does that play? What more can we be doing there, and what role, and how can that, help meet the challenge?
Good question. Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, so just so we're clear, the Green Homes Grant was a UK government initiative which applied in England, not in Scotland. So we had a different approach here, which was much more effective in trying to support the transition. Can I say, which I think is a good example of trying to do things from the bottom up rather than the top down, which is the approach that we've taken. I think one of the big challenges we have in delivering a just and fair transition is to try to manage that transition in a way that takes people with us and takes sectors with us. So if I take, for example, decarbonising people's homes, so the vast majority of people's homes in Scotland will be will be heated by gas or electricity. So if I want to get those gas fitters to move towards installing air source heat pumps, I know that 4 gas fitters going into a house will be able to fit a gas central heating system in 1 day. But I know 4 air source heat pump engineers going into a house, it will take them 3 days. So one of the things that we need to do is to work with the sectors on the key areas where we need to see pace of change to support the skills development which will be necessary to allow them to move into those sectors. So we have a skills guarantee program to help to support individuals being able to make that approach. So if you are, for example, a gas engineer, oil and gas engineer, and you want to transition into renewable energy, then we give you a skills guarantee that we will provide you with training and support and opportunity for you to go into the renewable energy sector. But we also need to get businesses to change their business model. Because if your business model is about installing gas systems into people's houses, and you can do 1 property in 1 day, to a model where you can only do 1 property in 3 days, then you're going to have to change your business model. And part of that is going to be about helping to increase the skill base so we can get more people into these industries, and also to transition them away from what are our heavy, if you like, our heavy gas intensive industries into the renewable sector. And one of the things that we're doing in order to help to support that is a green skills strategy, which will be worked and developed on the basis of what the sectors believe that we need to take forward and how we should do that. And the final point I want to make is that in taking forward our green skills strategy, we are going to be doing sectoral just transition plans. So there will be a just transition plan for the energy sector, there will be a just transition plan for the construction sector, and within that there will be key elements around skills and how we help to move people from one sector to the next sector as well. So we have to take industry with us, and we need to make sure that we help to support them in the transition what will be necessary, not just in the skills but actually also in changing their business model, because they will have to change their approach in order to help to support the transition and to deliver it in a fair and just way.
Thank you. Tina, as the youngest person on this panel anyway, what do you think of what Michael said there about the skills? As a young person, do you feel, from your perspective, the work is going in there to help develop the skills for young people for the future, for a net zero future?
Yeah, I think like in terms of the reforming of skills for Iceland, the main worry would be the aluminium sector. So if we were to phase that out in some way and have some other more greener industry like production of biofuels, then we need to reskill, and we need to make new skills for those sectors. So I think that's really important. And I also want to mention, just in terms of just transition for Iceland, I'm also thinking about the transportation sector, because we really need to higher the carbon tax, and we need to make sure that we make some kind of tax amendments for people that it would affect the most. And also right now, the transportation transformation is mostly in subsidies. So we're really subsidizing vehicles, but of course not everyone can buy a 10 million krona new electric Jeep, and we're actually spending more money on that on public transport. So even though we're building up our public transport system, we're still giving people that already have the means to buy a new vehicle and use that mode of transformation more money. So we really need to make it, we need to elevate the other factor that will benefit everyone, not just a few.
Thank you. I'm going to change topics for the moment. Helmut, I'm going to come to you first. One of our calls here is to invest in nature as part of the solution. What's Austria doing? And what more does it need to do?
Investing in nature is definitely important. We talk about nature-based solutions. We need it as a carbon sink to balance out rests of emission when you aim to be climate neutral. And of course, it's also preserving our landscape. We have some discussions, honestly, when we install wind power. So for the regions in the mountains, it's not so much liked by the tourism regions, but we have certain areas where there is a priority area, while others are blocked for wind power. So you have to find the balance, but it's definitely important to invest in nature as carbon sink, because technical sinks, in our view, are maybe a last resort at the end, but not now. Let's rely on natural sinks first.
Yeah, we need to make sure our renewables are right technologies in the right place. And for those who don't know, the UK, in fact, Western Europe's biggest onshore wind farm is just outside of Glasgow, Whiteley's wind farm. And it's a tourist attraction. 100,000 people go through the doors of that tourist centre each day. So I think it's possible to make renewables attractive for people to come and visit. Krista, investing in nature.
That's very important. We need to understand that this climate crisis and biodiversity crisis are linked to each other. They are both the reason because we are using the natural resources more than they can we have the renewable ones, and we are not. Our consumption is not beneath the planetary boundaries. That's the main reason for both of the crises. And of course, when we are solving the climate crisis, we need to take care that we don't harm the biodiversity at the same time. So that's why we need to have the solutions that which are good both for the climate and the nature. And then we come to the nature-based solutions. But it's also the question that we need to make that we take care our carbon storages and carbon sinks. And coming from Finland, there's of course then we go to the forests. And the question is that how much we can use the forests. We can't use it too much, and we can't use it as a biomass for energy. We really need to make sure that at the same time we take care of the nature, take care of the biodiversity, and find those kind of solutions which are good for both the climate and nature.
Thank you, Michael. So Scotland's famous for its nature, peatlands, forests or oceans. What's Scotland doing with regards to investing in nature for climate change?
So I think of the twin crises, it's very often the climate change crisis that is the centre of our focus, whereas the loss of biodiversity and the nature loss that we are facing are both completely interlinked, and they are both interdependent on one another, which is why I completely agree with Chris's point about the need for us to maximise the use of our natural mitigations to tackle climate change. And I mentioned earlier on, one of the mistakes that we have made in the past is to allow some of our wetlands to be dried out and our peatlands to be dried out, and they are now net emitters as opposed to carbon sinks, which is why we have a very extensive programme of re-wetting them and learning the lessons of the mistakes that we have made. You may have heard of the Edinburgh Declaration on biodiversity and nature loss, which has been pushed by the Scottish Government because we believe it plays a really important part in helping to try and encourage others across the world to show leadership on tackling nature loss and biodiversity loss. And the Edinburgh Declaration, we're encouraging countries to sign up to it, to demonstrate their willingness to show leadership in this sector as well. So anyone here who's not signed up to the Edinburgh Declaration, please take the opportunity to do so. And a big part of our plan going forward will be helping to not just repair but protect our peatlands, more extensive reforestation, protecting our natural assets. So around between now and 2030, around 30% of Scotland's land will be of a protected status. Within that, at least 10% of it highly protected. We also need to remember our offshore natural environment, how we protect our marine environment in order to help to ensure in which it's not exploited and overused, again because of the importance it has in helping to support biodiversity but also in tackling climate change. And I want to just finish off on the point that was made around the challenge we have, and you mentioned Whiteley's, it's not that far from here, Europe's biggest onshore wind farm, which is a very well recognised tourist location now for walkers and cyclists because of its pathways. Barack Obama was making the point yesterday, there will be times when we have to make compromises. And in order to meet our climate change targets, we are going to have to take forward some measures that will have an impact. So those who are not so keen on onshore wind farms because the impact on the visual amenity of an area from a tourism point of view, sometimes we have to compromise in these things and recognising actually they are mission critical to achieving our climate change targets. So there will be times when we'll have to make compromises in protecting our natural environment and also in taking forward measures that will help to meet our climate change targets. And that's always a difficult dialogue and always a challenging area to try and get an agreed position on.
So we're coming towards the end, the last section now. Before this event took place, the Climate Action Tracker published their latest analysis of how the commitments made so far before and during the Glasgow COP whether or not they take us closer to 2 or 1.5. And their analysis says we have a credibility gap. The actions so far committed are not good enough. In fact, they said we're on for at best 2.4, an optimistic 1.8, but where the big gap is in that near term, in the next decade, 2030. They also said a challenge to all countries, which was all countries need to go back and revise their plans, and they need to do almost on an annual basis. Briefly, I'd be interested, starting with Hilma at the end, is what would you respond to that challenge, given those figures?
Well, it's a challenge, that's quite clear. I see it also at some danger if there are signals that if all these pledges will be implemented, if all the MDCs are implemented, we are on an optimistic 1.8 degrees pathway. That's really a danger because, as you said, it's far away. We need to act now, we need to act decisive in this decade. And so it might be used by some as an excuse, well, we are well on the way, we don't need to do more. This is really a dangerous trap we have to avoid. And we have in the Paris Agreement the 5-year cycle to revisit, to increase our ambition, which will be done by 2025, the next step. But I agree, on our domestic level we can do better, we can do more, and of course we have to do more. So we shouldn't wait for these 5-year steps of Paris. Let's do more in our domestic area.
Thank you. Tina?
Yeah, so like we know, the next decade is crucial, and I think like for Iceland, I want to say that yes, we are a part of this mutual pledge with EU and Norway, but we haven't legislated our own independent target for 2030. So how are we going to become carbon neutral 2040 when we're halfway there in 2030 and we haven't decided what we're going to do? So I think that's really crucial, and I feel like everything in this should be, we of course have to update our target, and then we have to update our action plan accordingly, and we need to follow scientific advice in every step and upgrade. We can't just say we're doing something, but when we get the latest news, we know we need to higher the standard, then Iceland and all other countries have to do so.
Thank you. Michael, briefly.
So I think, we need to continue to try and press countries to be ambitious. You do that through your own actions, your own leadership, by collectively coming together with like-minded countries to make your voices heard about why it's important and how you can go about doing it. You do, and we need to make sure that we continue to apply as much pressure as possible to get countries to deliver on the 1.5 and keeping it alive. Look, the nub of this is that if my generation get it wrong, we don't get it wrong for my generation, we get it wrong for my kids, and we get it wrong for future generations, and we can't afford to do that. We should certainly not be allowing our children to inherit our planet in a worse state than we inherited it. So, or that we have not set it on the course to healing in the way in which is necessary, and politically. We can't afford politicians not to take the actions that are necessary to keep 1.5 degrees alive. So we just need to keep demonstrating by our own actions, our own behaviour, demonstrating the leadership, collectively drawing voices together in pushing for more ambitious targets until the countries that are not making progress wake up and recognise the need for urgent action.
Thank you. Krista, final word.
Well, in Finland we are updating our Climate Act law, so we put that in our legislation, our carbon neutral target, and also 30, 40 and 50 targets. And we also put on the law that we need to update them when we know more. And now actually all the time the science is telling us that we even need to do more. But I think it's the more important from the COP is that keep 1.5 alive. We need more action. We need to do faster. And I think the price for the carbon is one very effective solution. So that's what we need to do as well, globally.
Fantastic. You've actually done probably a better summing up than I would have done. So I'm going to leave it on that final word. I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining us. I'd like a round of applause to thank our guests. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you, everyone.
So, I was up Iceland a few years ago, as well.